Eva Lawson sat quietly at the long table, her fingers gently curled around the stem of her wineglass. The restaurant shimmered under soft golden lighting, the crystal chandeliers above casting elegant patterns on the white tablecloth. Tonight was meant to be a celebration, Daniel's latest business triumph. The table was full, laughter flowing easily among Daniel's colleagues, his friends, and even his teenage daughter, Chloe, who looked more at ease than Eva had seen in weeks. But as the voices rose around her, Eva remained still, smiling politely, sipping slowly, her presence felt, yet somehow distant. Because beneath all the sparkle and charm, something inside her felt strangely quiet. Eva had worn the midnight blue dress she designed herself, hoping Daniel might notice. He hadn't. He barely glanced at her when they arrived, too busy shaking hands and basking in the attention. As the conversation shifted to relationships, Eva quietly excused herself to the restroom. When she stepped back toward the table, she stopped unseen, just behind the half-closed partition wall, near their booth. She heard Daniel's voice clearly low, but sharp. "She's fine, I guess," Daniel said with a laugh that made Eva's stomach turn. "But let's be real, she's a burden dead weight. I mean, she's lucky to be with me, right?" Laughter followed, quick, uncomfortable, but no one challenged him. Eva froze, her chest tightened, as if someone had pressed a heavy stone into her lung. She felt heat rush to her cheeks, not from the warm restaurant, but from humiliation. These weren't strangers. They were Daniel's family, their friends, people she had invited into her home. And he had said it like it was nothing, like she wasn't even a person sitting a few feet away. She forced herself to move, walking back to her seat, her face carefully blank. No one at the table seemed to notice her trembling hands as she lowered herself into her chair. The chatter continued as if nothing had happened. She picked up her fork and focused on her plate, barely hearing the conversation swirling around her. Daniel laughed again, the sound echoing in her head, a burden dead weight, lucky to be with him. Her heart hurt, but under that pain, something new stirred, something sharp and cold. She sat silently, her back straightening, her fingers steadying. She did not cry, she did not speak, she simply stared at the wine in her glass, and felt something inside her shift, like a door unlocking quietly. For years she had trusted Daniel, believing the marriage was a partnership. She had given up pieces of herself for him, let him control their finances, let him lead their life together. And yet here he was, humiliating her without a second thought. Eva breathed in slowly, forcing down the tears, threatening to rise. The conversation flowed effortlessly, as though nothing had happened. But in Eva's silence, one clear thought formed: this ends now. Eva Lawson did not have the kind of childhood most people talked about with warm smiles. She lost both of her parents when she was only 10 years old. She grew up in foster care, moving from one home to another, never really belonging anywhere. That pain of never having a family made her promise herself one thing: she would build a life she could be proud of, even if she had to do it all on her own. By the time she was 25, Eva had already made a name for herself. She had a natural talent for design and fashion. She started with a small online store, sewing late at night and delivering orders by hand. Within 5 years, her designs had gained attention, and she built her own fashion label. It wasn't huge, but it was hers, her work, her dream, her independence. Then she met Daniel Lawson. He was charming, confident, and successful. Daniel was 8 years older and already a high-powered CEO when they met at a charity gala. He had recently gone through a divorce and was raising his teenage daughter, Chloe, alone. Daniel made Eva feel wanted in a way she had never experienced before. He called her beautiful, smart, strong. For someone who had grown up feeling unwanted, his attention felt like sunlight after years of darkness. Within a year, they were married. Eva moved into Daniel's modern, luxurious home, far away from her small studio apartment. For the first time in her life, she had stability and family. At least, that's what she thought. But marriage to Daniel slowly changed things. Daniel liked control. He insisted on handling all finances, because, As he said, "You don't need to worry about money, I've got us covered." Ava agreed, trusting him completely. She didn't even notice when access to accounts slowly shifted to his name alone. When she brought up her fashion line, Daniel would smile politely and say, "That's cute, but focus on home, on us. You don't need to work." Ava listened. She trusted his judgment, believing he wanted what was best for them. Over time, she scaled back her business, running it quietly on the side, under a different name, mostly online, so Daniel wouldn't dismiss it again. She never told him how well it was doing, because it felt safer to keep it hers, something untouched by his control. The hardest part of her marriage, though, was Chloe. At 17, Chloe saw Ava as nothing more than a gold digger, a younger woman who married her father for his wealth. No matter how many times Ava tried to be kind or understanding, Chloe kept her at arm's length, throwing sharp comments whenever Daniel wasn't listening. "Must be nice living off Dad's money," Chloe would mutter, rolling her eye. Daniel rarely intervened, often brushing it off as teenage mood swings. Ava told herself it was just a phase, that one day Chloe would see she wasn't the enemy. She wanted a family so badly that she accepted the coldness and pushed her feelings aside. On the outside, Ava had what many people envied: a wealthy husband, a beautiful home, designer clothes, luxury vacations. But inside, she often felt invisible. She went to social events as Daniel's wife, standing quietly beside him while he charmed investors, and people saw them as a power couple, but Ava felt more like an accessory than a partner. Even with her secret fashion business growing, even knowing she was capable and strong, Ava clung to her marriage. She told herself love meant sacrifice and patience. She ignored the loneliness when Daniel worked late nights or traveled without telling her in advance. She convinced herself that being loved, even if it felt distant, was better than being alone again. Ava's life before the dinner humiliation was built on trust and quiet compromise. She believed she was part of something real, that Daniel cared, that one day Chloe might see her differently. She still wanted to believe that her marriage was worth holding on to. Even when Daniel dismissed her work, even when Chloe glared at her across the breakfast table, she had fought so hard to build a life for herself, and she thought she had finally done it. But deep down, there was an ache she couldn't name, a silence she couldn't ignore. Ava didn't know it yet, but that ache was about to change everything. "You don't bring anything to this marriage." Daniel's voice was cold and sharp, cutting through the quiet of their living room like a blade. He didn't even look at her when he said it. He sat on the edge of the couch, scrolling through his phone as if she wasn't even there. Ava stood frozen, her hands gripping the back of a chair. She had just come back from the bathroom, still holding in the pain from the humiliation at dinner. She thought maybe he would apologize, maybe say he didn't mean what he said in front of everyone. Instead, he doubled down. "You're just here," Daniel added, his eyes still on his phone. "You don't work, you don't bring in money, you don't even handle the house properly. I do everything. Ava, you're lucky I'm still here." Ava felt the blood drain from her face. For years, she had trusted this man, believed in him, and now he said it so easily, like she was nothing. She didn't reply, not because she had no words, but because if she spoke, she might break down, and she refused to give him that satisfaction. Instead, she turned, walked to their bedroom, and closed the door softly behind her. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor, breathing slowly. "He really thinks I'm nothing. He really believes I bring nothing." For a long time, she sat in silence. Then she stood, walked to her side of the closet, and reached for the small black box hidden behind a row of shoes. Inside was a single USB drive and a notebook with handwritten notes, details of her small fashion business, and something else she had almost forgotten about: her inheritance. When her aunt passed away 3 years ago, she had left Ava everything: land, investments, and trust funds that added up to $500 million. Ava had never touched it. She respected Daniel's pride and didn't want him to feel like she had more than him. She thought their marriage was about love, not money. That night, sitting cross-legged on the bed with her laptop open, Ava logged into her private accounts for the first time in years. She checked the balance. Her aunt's investments had grown even more, turning into numbers that almost didn't feel real. $500 million. Her eyes filled with tears, not from happiness, but from heartbreak. All this time, I thought he loved me for me. All this time I let him control everything, because I trusted him, and he calls me a burden. Something inside her snapped. The quiet ache she had carried for years hardened into resolve. She wasn't going to cry in the dark anymore. She wasn't going to let him humiliate her again. She started making moves that very night. She transferred money into secure accounts under her name only, unreachable by Daniel. She called her lawyer, one she had quietly kept on retainer for her business, and scheduled a private meeting. By midnight, Ava had a plan forming. She wasn't just going to leave Daniel. She was going to take back everything he had used to control her. For the first time in years, Ava felt calm, almost free. She closed her laptop, wiped her eyes, and whispered to herself, "You'll see who brings what, Daniel." And deep down she knew this wasn't going to be a quiet goodbye. This was going to be the beginning of something big. Ava moved carefully, every step quiet and planned. At night, when Daniel was asleep, she sat in her home office, transferring money into secure accounts that only she could access. She hired the best financial advisors, people Daniel didn't know, to make sure every dollar was protected. Every click of the keyboard felt like taking back a piece of herself. Daniel noticed nothing. He was too busy acting like the perfect CEO in public, while being cold and distant at home. After the dinner humiliation, he had stopped pretending even in private. He barely spoke to her, unless it was to criticize something she had done. At events, his behavior became worse. He openly flirted with other women, young assistants, business partners, wives, even waitresses. He would laugh and touch their arms, while Ava stood nearby, pretending not to notice, but every time her heart ached. People were starting to look at her differently, some with pity, others with judgment. Chloe, Daniel's 17-year-old daughter, didn't make things easy. She told her friends that Ava was just a trophy wife and that she only married Dad for money. The rumors spread quickly in their social circle. Some people whispered behind Ava's back, others smiled politely to her face, while believing Chloe's word. One evening, Ava sat in her car outside a coffee shop, staring at her phone. Her best friend, Mia, had texted, "Are you okay?" Ava hesitated, then replied, "Can we talk?" When Mia arrived, Ava felt the weight in her chest ease a little. Mia was one of the few people Ava could trust completely. She told her everything. Daniel's cruel words, the flirting, Chloe's rumors, and her secret inheritance. Mia's eyes widened. Ava, $500 million, and he doesn't know. Ava shook her head. "I never touched it. I respected his pride. I thought he loved me for me." Her voice cracked. Mia reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "He doesn't deserve you. And if he's treating you like this, you need to get out before it gets worse." But it did get worse. A week later, Ava discovered something that made her blood run cold. Her lawyer called, voice tight. "Ava, did you know your husband used your fashion business name as collateral for one of his deals?" Ava froze. "What? That's impossible. I never gave him permission." "It's real," the lawyer said. "He filed paperwork under your name. If his company defaults, your business could be taken." Ava's heart pounded in her ears. She logged into the business registry and saw it herself. Daniel had forged her signature, using her company, a brand she built from nothing, as leverage for his failing deals. Her hands shook as she sat in her office, staring at the screen. It wasn't just humiliation anymore. It was betrayal on a level she hadn't imagined. He had laughed at her, dismissed her, humiliated her publicly, and now he was stealing from her. That night, Ava didn't sleep. She stayed up, reading through every contract Daniel had touched in the last 2 years. The more she read, the angrier she became. He had been lying to her for months, maybe years. His business wasn't as successful as he pretended. He was sinking, and instead of asking for help, he had quietly put her at risk. By morning, Ava's heartbreak had hardened into rage. She paced the kitchen, phone in hand, whispering to herself, "He thinks I'm a burden. He thinks I bring nothing. He's been using me to stay afloat." She called Mia again. "I know what I'm going to do," she said, voice steady now. Mia hesitated. "Ava, just be careful. Daniel doesn't seem like the kind of man who takes losing well." Ava smiled faintly, though there was no joy in it. "He's already lost me. He just doesn't know it yet." From that day on, every move Ava made was deliberate. She had her lawyer prepare documents, quietly pulling her business name out of Daniel's reach. She hired private investigators to look into his financial records, his deals, and even his personal behavior. Each report she received showed the same thing. Daniel's empire was built on shaky ground, and he had been using her as a safety net the entire time. She started documenting everything, every cruel comment, every forged signature, every transfer of her assets he had tried to control. She saved copies in secure drives and physical folders. At events, when Daniel flirted, Ava no longer felt hurt. She felt detached, watching him like he was a stranger. When Chloe rolled her eyes and whispered, "Gold digger," Ava only gave a small, tight smile. Soon, she thought, they would all see the truth. Inside, Ava felt a storm building. Years of silence, of letting herself be controlled and belittled, were boiling into something powerful. She no longer saw herself as the woman Daniel called dead weight. She was stronger, smarter, and far more capable than he ever imagined. And she was ready to prove it. The betrayal had pushed her to a point she could never go back from. Ava wasn't planning to leave quietly anymore. She was going to take back everything he had tried to steal and make sure Daniel Lawson would never forget who he underestimated. The ballroom glittered with lights, music, and the low hum of expensive conversations. It was another high-profile dinner, the kind Daniel loved. He thrived in places like this, important people, cameras flashing, everyone waiting to shake his hand. Ava walked beside him, calm and elegant, wearing a silver gown that shimmered with each step. This time, though, something was different. Ava wasn't there as his accessory. She had a plan. Daniel smiled and laughed, already soaking up attention as he told stories about his latest successful deal. Ava stayed quiet, watching him. She thought about the first dinner where he had humiliated her, calling her a burden. Tonight, she was going to return the favor, but with truth, not cruelty. When the room settled and speeches began, Daniel was invited to speak about the future of business leadership. He stood confidently, holding a microphone, talking about growth, power, and vision. Ava waited until the applause ended before stepping forward. "Actually," she said, her voice steady, carrying through the hall, "I have something to add." The room quieted. Daniel froze for a moment, then forced a smile. "Ava, honey, not now." She took the microphone from the stand. "No, Daniel, now." Ava turned to face the crowd. "For years, I've been called many things, some behind my back, some right in front of me. A burden, dead weight, a trophy wife. But tonight, I'd like to tell my side of the story." People shifted in their seats. Cameras turned. Daniel's jaw tightened. 3 years ago, Ava continued, "I inherited $500 million from my late aunt. I never touched it because I respected my husband's pride. I thought our marriage was about love, not control. I was wrong." A murmur ran through the room. Daniel stepped forward. "Ava, let's not do this here." She ignored him. While I stayed silent, Daniel used my business name as collateral for his failing deals. He forged my signature, risked everything I built, and did it without my consent. So, I took action. As of this morning, all joint accounts have been closed. Every asset in my name has been moved to secure accounts under my sole control. And Daniel," she paused, looking directly at him, "you have been officially removed from the board of my company." The room erupted into whispers. Daniel's face went pale. "You can't do that." "Already did," Ava said simply. She handed a folder to the head of the event committee, containing proof of her filings. A man in a dark suit approached Daniel, whispering urgently in his ear. Daniel's face drained of color even more. Ava knew what he had just been told. Without her assets, Daniel's company was collapsing. The illegal use of her name and property had triggered investigations. Banks had already frozen his business accounts pending review. "You built your image on control, Daniel," Ava said softly, but everyone heard her. "You thought I brought nothing to this marriage, but it turns out you were the one leaning on me." Daniel reached for her arm, his voice breaking. "Ava, wait, let's talk about this at home." She stepped back. "There is no home, Daniel. Not anymore." The silence in the room was heavy. Guests stared, unsure what to do, while reporters eagerly wrote notes. For years, Daniel had been the one holding all the power. Tonight it vanished right in front of him. Ava handed the microphone back and walked out of the ballroom, her steps slow, controlled, and powerful. Behind her, voices exploded, questions, shocked gasps, and Daniel calling her name. She didn't turn back. Outside, Ava took a deep breath. The cool night air hit her face, and she smiled for the first time in weeks. Everything Daniel had used to control her, money, status, reputation, was gone for him now. He had nothing left to hold over her. Inside the ballroom, Daniel's world was falling apart. His phone buzzed non-stop. Lawyers, board members, investors, all demanding answers. By morning, news channels would report the scandal. His company's stock would plummet. Investigations would begin. Ava's humiliation had started in a room like that, with him laughing at her expense. Now it ended the same way, only this time, she wasn't the one ashamed. Daniel was. For the first time in years, Ava felt truly free. She had taken back her power, her voice, and her life. And Daniel Lawson could no longer take any of it away. Ava filed for divorce. The very next morning, her lawyer moved fast, armed with all the evidence she had gathered: fraud, forged signatures, and the illegal use of her business name. Daniel tried to fight back at first, yelling in meetings and threatening to destroy her in court. But his threats meant nothing now. The proof was clear. Daniel had used Ava's assets without her consent. When the case reached court, the judge didn't hold back. Because of Daniel's fraud, Ava was granted the majority of the assets, including their main house, several investments, and full rights to her fashion business. Daniel's company, already collapsing after her public reveal, lost its biggest clients and investors. For years, Daniel had made Ava feel small and powerless. Now he stood in court, defeated, unable to look her in the eye. Chloe, who had once hated Ava and called her a gold digger, was furious at first. She shouted at Ava in the courthouse hallway, saying she had ruined her father's life. Ava listened quietly and said only one thing: "One day, you'll see who really did this." Then she walked away. Weeks later, Chloe showed up at Ava's new apartment. She looked different, tired, sad, and confused. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "Dad lied to everyone. I heard the recordings, saw the documents. He used your name. He blamed you for everything, but it was him." Ava hugged her gently. "I never wanted to hurt you, Chloe. I just couldn't let him keep taking from me." It was a small moment, but an important one. Chloe began to visit Ava more often, asking for advice, and even helping out with her fashion work. Slowly, the cold wall between them began to Ava didn't just stop at protecting herself. She took the pain of her marriage and turned it into something bigger. She launched a foundation focused on helping women gain financial independence, teaching them how to protect their money, start businesses, and never feel trapped the way she once had. Within months, her foundation had hundreds of women attending workshops and mentorship programs. The media loved her story, the burdened wife who became a powerhouse, not by revenge alone, but by building something meaningful. She gave interviews, stood on stages, and told women everywhere, "You are not a burden, you are your own blessing." Her fashion line, which Daniel once dismissed as cute, exploded in popularity. Orders doubled. Investors approached her, not because of Daniel's name, but because of her talent and leadership, she opened a new office for her team, filled with light and energy, a reflection of her new life. On the day her divorce was finalized, Ava stood outside the courthouse, breathing deeply. There were no tears this time, no pain, only relief. Daniel had lost everything he used to control her, and she had gained far more than money. She had her freedom, her voice, and her confidence back. That night, Ava sat in her apartment, looking at a stack of letters from women her foundation had already helped. One read, "Because of you I opened my first business account today." Another said, "Thank you for showing me I don't have to stay in a toxic marriage." Ava smiled, tears of pride filling her eyes. She had turned her heartbreak into hope for others. For the first time in her life, she wasn't just surviving or proving herself to someone else. She was living for herself and lifting others along the way. She whispered to herself, "I'm free, finally free." And this time, she believed it with all her heart. Ava stood alone in her new office, sunlight streaming through the tall windows. The walls were decorated with sketches from her fashion line and photos from her Women's Foundation events. But her eyes were on one thing, a small framed quote on her desk. "You are not a burden, you are the blessing." She picked up the frame and held it gently, her fingers brushing over the words. For a moment, her eyes filled with tears. Not the tears of pain she had shed so many times before, but tears of gratitude and relief. She remembered the nights she sat alone in a house that never felt like home, thinking she wasn't enough. She remembered Daniel's cold voice calling her dead weight, making her believe she brought nothing to their marriage. And now, here she was, free, powerful, and surrounded by people who believed in her. A soft smile spread across her face as she looked around the office, listening to the buzz of activity outside her door. Women she had inspired were building their own futures, because she had chosen to fight back, to rise instead of break. Ava placed the frame back on the desk and whispered, "You did it." The evening sun painted the room in a warm glow as Ava stepped to the window, looking out at the city below. It felt like the world had opened up again, like she could finally breathe without fear or shame. She wiped the last tear from her cheek and whispered softly to herself, "Sometimes, the deepest heartbreak becomes the doorway to the freedom you didn't know you were waiting for." And with that, Ava smiled, tears in her eyes, strength in her step, ready to walk forward into the life she had crafted with her own two hands. Thank you for staying with us until the end. If this story touched you, leave a comment, and subscribe for more powerful, soul-stirring tales. Until next time, take care.